narrative. And the prosecution and the victim's narrative. And the prosecution and the victim's representatives simply can't have their cake and eat it. They can't say in one breath that drugs and guns were planted on victims and therefore dispute crime scene evidence, while at the same time complaining about the lack of crime scene evidence. Yet the prosecution virtually disregards these objective and forensic indicators in favor of narrow and often uncorroborated insider testimony. This is best illustrated in Incident 10, which rests almost entirely on P1160's assertion that a firearm was planted at the scene of the crime, and the official report fabricated. Yet P1160 expressly accepts that he did not witness the planting of the firearm and merely assumes that it must have happened, before conceding that the firearm may already have been present. Once again, we are in the realm of inadmissible conjecture. We know that an investigation followed that incident. The opening of an inquiry is not consistent with the intention to conceal wrongdoing. Beyond that, as I've just mentioned, the record reflects the detection of gunpowder residue on victims' hands in this particular incident, a forensic indicator consistent with an exchange of gunfire and inconsistent with the witness's testimony, which is notably, once again, uncorroborated. Incident 11. This is the sole incident in Count 2 where direct linkage to Mr. Duterte is advanced. And this linkage rests entirely on voice recognition by an individual who claims to have overheard a telephone conversation and recognized the president's voice, while being physically moved from one location to another. The alleged recipient of the telephone call himself was never interviewed, and another person present, on whom the prosecution relies for corroboration, did not hear the conversation. After all, would it not have been an item of interest to all those present in that specific location that the President of the Republic himself had condescended to discuss matters of such a criminal nature by way of telephone? So the ridiculous assertion stands solely on the word of one single individual. The only other corroborating witness, the one who heard nothing, acknowledged a personal resentment that he harbored for the then President, Rodrigo Duterte, for reasons you will find in PHL OTP 000-16420-R01 at 0022, lines 695 to 708. Once again, I can't mention the reasons because it's redacted. Voice recognition in uncontrolled conditions, while being physically moved, and uncorroborated by any forensic or documentary evidence, cannot constitute substantial grounds for confirmation, particularly where it forms the sole mechanism for attribution. Incident 12. This incident relies heavily on a central witness whose credibility is seriously compromised by retaliatory motives he admits to harboring against Mr. Duterte. This can be found in OTP tab 55 at page 27. Line and another reason that we cannot mention in open session, but which can be found in PHL OTP 000-15167-R01 at page 0008. For this particular incident, the case record demonstrates that this operation was conducted pursuant to a judicially issued search warrant, with operational reports and documentation concerning the recovery of firearms. To display such an extensive contemporaneous record, one would expect the prosecution to produce forensic evidence capable of undermining the reliability of these materials, evidence demonstrating fabrication or inconsistency sufficient to reduce their probative value. None, however, has been forwarded, because none presumably exists. Incident 13. This relates to the killing of Mayor Espinosa, whose name I can mention, and Raoul Yap, who was shot in a police cell. The prosecution's case is largely premised on a witness who claimed to have heard but admitted not to have seen anything. Thus, there is nothing in the prosecution's evidence to contradict the alternative theory proposed for this incident, which is that there was a firefight between the victims and the officers in the police station Leyte sub-provincial jail. Nor is there a need to enter into these conflicting accounts, because the prosecution's own evidence exculpates Rodrigo Duterte for responsibility for this incident. Not that he admits any connection to it. After all, according to the prosecution, on 1 August 2016, Rodrigo Duterte gave Espinosa a 24-hour ultimatum to surrender. And surrender he did the following day. 4 days later, Rodrigo Duterte commended Espinosa for surrendering to Ronald de la Rosa, commenting that it was just as well that he did. So if we look at it from the point of view of Rodrigo Duterte, that is where the incident ended, despite Mr. Jeremy exhorting us to believe otherwise. What happened thereafter, as awful as it may be, had nothing to do with our client, and not one witness can say that. The prosecution's narrative in Incident 14, the raid on the house of another person who I can mention, the mayor of Ozmiz City, rests exclusively on a witness who, for reasons we cannot explain in open session, is wholly unable to provide complete or reliable testimony for reasons that can be found in D36, tab 181, lines 128 to 155, and lines 191 to 212. Contemporaneous documentary police reports reflect that this police operation proceeded pursuant to 6 judicial search warrants, something hardly consistent with a premeditated murder scheme. After all, if the intention was cold-blooded murder, why go to the bother of involving a judge? Official investigative materials also indicate that officers approached the premises, announced the execution of the warrant, and were met with gunfire that struck a patrol vehicle and injured an officer, prompting a return of fire. This directly refutes what Ms. Massiter so categorically claimed on Tuesday, namely that none of the arresting officers were ever harmed during the operations. Transcript. T5, page 44, line 24. In every case, the victim was killed, and none of the arresting officers were harmed. The exchange of fire, as reported, is supported by the fact that gunpowder residue was found on 7 individuals, including on the mayor himself, and a paraffin test turned out positive on the person of one of the victims, indicating that he had discharged a firearm, something totally negating the gun plant theory proposed by the prosecution's only witness. It is also worth stressing that 4 individuals were arrested alive following the operation, and that one of them was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment after the domestic courts rejected claims of evidence planting. That fact alone is not consistent with a theory of indiscriminate execution, but is rather consistent instead with arrest and prosecution within the boundaries of the law and not indiscriminate use of force. So to summarize, across incidents 10 to 14, count 2, we see absolutely no evidence whatsoever of any attribution to Mr. Duterte on the granular level, nor do we see any evidence of a mutually agreed course of conduct on the upper hierarchical level of government, involving Mr. Duterte and his alleged so-called co-perpetrators. The record reflects police operations conducted at unit level, sometimes under judicial warrant. P.1166 describes operational discretion resting with the local team leaders and characterizes planned killings as rare and locally motivated. P.1066 clarifies that to neutralize, that word which has been heard so often in the last few days, neutralize referred to lawful enforcement, not killing, the prosecution's own witness. The Senate committee report refers to rogue uniformed police. To conclude, the evidence reflects decentralization, not control required under indirect co-perpetration. And for these reasons, confirmation on count 2 cannot stand. Now, I'm going to start count 3. We have until 10:30. I'm conscious of the time allotted to me. So count 3 relates to the barangay clearance operations during the presidential period. Incident 15 marks the beginning of the barangay clearance operations. Now, from this point forward, a familiar pattern emerges in the prosecution's narrative. The same modus operandi, to employ Mr. Jeremy's language. Routine buy-bust operations are recast as sham exercises designed to conceal extrajudicial killings allegedly ordered from some unspecified source from above. Mr. Jeremy claims a target was identified through the use of lists. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. As one witness, an intelligence officer, explains in his testimony, the use of lists is a normal standard procedure. Once validation was conducted on a person, X, a file on that person would be created as a result of intelligence operations. Then, so claim Mr. Jeremy and Ms. Croft, the target is murdered and reports are falsified and rewards are paid out. This, Ms. Croft suggested at transcript 5, page 23, lines 11 to 13, is the systemicity of the pre-planned attack. But this is not the case. The defense can point to contemporaneous official records generated across different units or organizations that show clearly that in the majority of these incidents, the evidence reflects legitimate law enforcement operations involving spontaneous and reported exchanges of fire and uses of force subjected to forensic and administrative review. These are not clandestine acts hidden from scrutiny, Madam President, but rather recorded operations consistent with self-defense in the course of policing. And where the evidentiary record supports competing inferences, including the inference of a lawful armed confrontation and the inference of an unlawful execution, well, and with this I will conclude, in dubio pro reo. 10:30.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaufman. So I've understood that you would like to use the time that remains to you, and you still have 20 minutes, actually. I understood that you wanted to use that time. Yes, I would, but I'm not so sure if I can conclude in 20 minutes.
C'est possible. OK. Nous essaierons, madame.
Ouais, donc vous avez la...
Judge Motek, very well. It's still you. You have the floor. Proceed.
Across incidents 15 through 49, the Chamber will repeatedly encounter contemporaneous buy-bust or warrant-based documentation, reported exchanges of fire, gunshot residue findings, ballistic testing, immediate hospital transport, internal investigations, and in some cases, prosecution and conviction of officers. Against all of this evidence that you've just seen on the screen here, the prosecution offers single insider accounts of alleged stagings, uncorroborated assertions of weapons planting, and nanlabans, unsupported by any forensic evidence, often speculative, frequently contradicted by the alleged co-participants, or yet, more often, complete silence from the alleged co-participants, as they were never even questioned about the incident. And most importantly, despite Mr. Jeremy's assertions on Tuesday, wherein he claimed that the police reports were repeatedly falsified to legitimate the operations as acts of self-defense, copy-paste reports in which victims were frequently blamed for their own deaths, there is zero proof, none, that the only existing contemporaneous documentary evidence is fabricated or unreliable. No proof whatsoever of this supposed falsification in the entire case record. And on this point, let us just clarify a basic principle, that a state document with the appropriate stamps and signatures and what have you is prima facie reliable, or in other words, it carries a presumption of administrative regularity. And if the prosecution seeks to displace that document and call the entire state apparatus into question, then the burden rests on it to produce credible, objective evidence rebutting that presumption. Bare allegations or reliance on single prosecution witnesses cannot suffice to overcome this presumption of authenticity and correctness, nor should the burden shift to the defense to prove that those documents are not falsified. Now, we do not deny that in some instances the record may reveal unlawful conduct by individual officers. Mr. Jeremy referred to a press release, OTP tab 108, in which the police proclaimed that 32 people were killed in Bulacan big-time operations, and then went on to refer to this as one single operation in which 32 victims were killed by the police in Bulacan. But what Mr. Jeremy failed to tell you, Your Honours, is that one of the prosecution's own witnesses explained clearly that he investigated these deaths in an official capacity soon after the killings and found that 33 people were actually killed in different municipalities and provinces in central Luzon, but that their bodies were delivered to Bulacan. This was not, as Mr. Jeremy suggested, a single incident of mass murder, but rather an improper aggregate of a series of law enforcement operations over the course of 24 hours executed in large geographical area and for which we have no evidence in the case record. There's no evidence on the perpetrators, victims, motives, manner of attacks, methodology, in essence, nothing to link them to an alleged fantasy common plan. Everything is just stitched together enough to give it a veneer of organization. I now turn to incidents reflecting documented armed confrontations. And as mentioned when I first turned to this count, the documentary record, which has not been displaced by any evidence proffered by the prosecution, reflects attempted arrests, resistance, and responsive use of force. And you've just seen some of the documents up there on the screen. Let's turn briefly to Incident 17, for which the prosecution has relied on a witness who stated that the planting of evidence was an open secret in the locality and province more generally. However, another witness, working in the same locality, P1208, states otherwise, that he was never involved in illegal operations resulting in deaths, was not aware of extrajudicial killings disguised as lawful operations, and confirms that there were no standing orders to kill. The operational objective, he explains, was arrest, lethal force only when the circumstances required it. And you can find this information in Defense tab 96. And we see this pattern again and again and again. In Incident 40, for example, P1131, who worked with the individual alleged to have shot the suspect, stated clearly that the killings occurred only in circumstances of lawful use of self-defense. That can be found at Defense tab 74, and you can see it on the screen as well. This type of testimonial evidence is also corroborated by documentary and forensic evidence. Incident 15, the prosecution again resorts to its usual pro forma narrative of staged killings or nanlabans. But what it has not done, of course, is prove this. Whereas I urge your honours to look at the screen, where you can see detailed documentary evidence about how this incident came about, and I summarize: a spontaneous exchange of fire after the suspect discharged a firearm, ballistics testing of the officer's weapon, affidavits by the police officers involved, and formal review and investigation of the officer who fired his weapon. Now, I'm not going to sit here and bore you with all the evidence we have on every single one of these incidents, but what I will tell you, Your Honours, is that we have this type of forensic evidence proving attempts, arrests, armed resistance, and responsive and sometimes disciplined use of force in no less than 13 incidents. I don't know where Mr. Butoyan got the idea from that there's no forensic evidence left in the case record. And may we remind you, Your Honours, until the prosecution proves otherwise, which it has not, these state documents remain prima facie, authentic, and reliable. For incidents substantiated by a single witness narrative and unconfirmed by alleged co-participants, I refer Your Honours to no less than 9 incidents. One prosecution witness, P1160, is the sole testimonial evidence for at least 3 incidents, while another 6 incidents are premised entirely on the testimony of P3. Now, what's interesting about these incidents is that P3 alleged that he was only one of a group of 3 or 4 perpetrators, and these other perpetrators are actually also prosecution witnesses. Yet none of the other witnesses corroborated his version of events. Not one. A couple of incidents alleged by the prosecution appear on its own evidence to be unrelated to drug enforcement, and thus questionably part of the fantasy common plan or organizational policy. For this, I would refer you to incidents 31 and 41, which involved targeting of 2 individuals, again, because of non-drugs related conduct. I'm not sure whether I can mention the type of conduct without revealing the identity, so I shall refrain from doing so. The prosecution has not presented any evidence to substantiate any nexus to anti-drug operations in either of these incidents. And for this, I refer you to D36, tab 158, at page 4. On the perpetrator's own account, the trigger for the killing was a personal grievance relating to property damage. There are numerous incidents against unidentified or improperly identified victims. The victim in incident 45 is described as a minor, just as in incident 38, another incident on which Mr. Jeremy focused on Tuesday. And by the way, on the subject of the killing of children, of course it ticks the right boxes for the prosecution insofar as it pulls the heartstrings. But apart from Kian de los Santos, the prosecution has not, despite its emphasis on children, presented to this chamber during these proceedings any evidence that even one victim, apart from Kian, in its 49 incidents was a minor. No birth certificates, no corroborative evidence, nothing. While incidents presented as involving minors are indeed grave, Article 61 requires proof, not emotion. It is for the prosecution to prove that the children were involved in these incidents, and not for the defense, once again, to prove a negative. Now, this evidentiary deficit extends even further. The Bulacan Provincial Office provided a certificate indicating that it had no record corresponding to the names of the victims, whose names have been redacted on the slide, which we will show you. Okay, but we'll pass on. But their names have been redacted. And these are alleged police killings, yet no operational report. Indeed, no contemporaneous documentation whatsoever has been produced. So on what does the prosecution base its claim that these individuals were murdered by the police other than P3? The prosecution relies almost exclusively on the account of P3 echoed by P8. And this is rather ironic. Does the prosecutor claim that P3 is corroborated by P8 when the source of P8's information is in fact P3 himself? Bootstrapping logic, once again. The alleged direct perpetrator, P1201, stated during his interview that he had never participated in an operation involving a child. The other officer allegedly present during both incidents, P1131, was never questioned about these events by the prosecution. And that omission, we submit, is not neutral.
Gagi, pinutol na naman siya. In your face niya kasi yung mga prosec, gagi. Well, sabi naman ni etong si Kaufman, no. Puro kayo claim at emotion. Wala kayong ebidensya. Paano mako-convict, no? Si PRRD kung wala kayong ebidensya? Propel to emotion kasi. Diba?
These incidents, therefore, cannot simultaneously be characterized as manifestations of a centrally designed OTBT-based common plan, because they quite clearly fall outside of that plan. And it does not reflect what the prosecution on Tuesday described as the systematic features of a national network operation. Instead, according to P3, the motive was personal financial gain through the sale of bodies. And if P3's account is accepted, it reflects opportunistic actions for personal gain of the most macabre kind. As held in Al-Hassan, an opportunistic act committed for personal profit without more falls outside the common plan. Now, just to finish up quickly on the issue of identity, in Incident 43, even the alleged perpetrators are not identified. Without identification, the Chamber cannot assess their institutional affiliation, chain of command, or attempt to make any possible linkage to Mr. Duterte. One more thing, Your Honours. The prosecution focused for some time on Incident 23. I can mention his name, Mr. Benjamin Vizda. Mr. Jeremy displayed compelling footage of Mr. Vizda's arrest and then
Bakit tinalis na naman, pucha? Eh, yun naman yung ano eh, yung pangalan niya, di ba?
what happened when Mr. Vizda was taken away on the motorcycle. The fact that while handcuffed, he attempted to grab the gun of one of the policemen, leading to a struggle and prompting the motorbike to fall over and the policeman to shoot Mr. Vizda twice in self-defense. And that this PNP report appears to be corroborated by another prosecution witness, whose testimony fully aligns with the substance of the police document. Mr. Jeremy claimed that the PNP reports were false, relying solely on the allegation of one witness that the scene was staged. This witness claimed that the handcuffs were removed from the victim, that the body was loaded on the tricycle a few minutes after being shot and then brought to the hospital. However, his account is contradicted by the very picture the prosecution has shown you on Tuesday. Indeed, it appears that the prosecution is submitting documentary evidence which undermines its own witness's testimony. As you can see here, handcuffs are on. The body is on the ground rather than on a tricycle. Photojournalists are also present. This contradiction was even noted by the prosecution's investigators at the time of the interview and was put to the witness. And when confronted by the investigators, what did that witness say? I don't know if I can.
Bilis naman nun. Bakit? Anong meron? Bakit ayaw nilang i-tackle ni Kaufman yun? Diba? Pwede naman silang the prosecutors discussed it the last time, diba? So ibig sabihin nasa lamesa na yun eh. You can debunk that one. Diba? Ang problema sa kanila, puro
still established vertical linkage
takot
to Mr. Duterte.
internet nila.
Or has the prosecution
Mang Temyong.
2 minutes left, not be satisfied? And finally, with regard to count 3, the prosecution's witnesses themselves concede that there was no formal approval process. Targets were selected without validation, officers acted for personal reasons, and decisions were taken locally. All of this destroys the assertion that there was a mutually agreed common plan. I will elaborate. P1160 claims hierarchical transmission of policy within the police, while simultaneously acknowledging officers' autonomous killings for personal motives. Those propositions cannot comfortably coexist P3 explains that certain officers acted outside any common plan and for opportunistic reasons. See Incident 38. In Incident 49, P1207 attributes instructions to local officers without evidence of communication or direction from higher authorities. And most significantly, P1207 P1207 states after a certain death, once again abiding by the redactions, Hang operations and killings ceased. This indicates, Madam President, Your Honours, that dependence on specific individuals, not an enduring organisational policy. A system-wide common plan cannot depend on the continued presence of a non-fungible local official. And with this, I conclude.
Judge Motok, thank you very much, Mr. Kaufman. All the arguments on the merits have been heard. We will now break for 40 minutes up to 10:30. And after we return, we will continue with the closing arguments or submissions, starting with the OTP. Thank you very much. Court is suspended.
Yun na yun, ang bilis naman. Suspended na agad. Diba? Well, for me, no, maganda yung pagkakasalansa naman ni, ni Kaufman, no? At naribatal niya ng maayos yung mga ipinukol kay FPRRD, di ba? Ang problema nga lang kasi dito sa ICC, they are trying to protect daw yung mga witnesses and so on and so forth. Pero kasi, di ba? During, we know those people, especially tayong mga Pinoy, because it is part of the news, di ba? Napanood na natin yung mga yan. Yung mga nangyari sa kanila, yung mga issues na nangyari, until the very end, kahit na hanggang ngayon, di ba, nakakulong na yung iba regarding dyan sa mga cases na yan. Di ba? Tapos, sinasabi ng ICC, hindi, kasi kailangan namin protektahan pa rin. O sige, fine, let's say, yeah. Pero, di ba, kinakat off nila ng tuluyan yung, yung mga sinasabi ni Kaufman. Sabi ni, Colmenares, ang hina raw ng defense ni Kaufman. Well, naribat niya namang maayos yung mga mga ipinukol kay FPRRD, di ba? Hindi naman siya hindi naman siya prosecutor. So you cannot be so aggressive, di ba? At kung aggressive ka man, isa lang gagawin sa They will cut you off, di ba? Problema din lahat ang detail kasi putol-putol, unfair. Yeah, in a way it's unfair, di ba? Teach, sa tingin mo dyan sa mga judge may hahatol ng tama. Madadala sa drama ng mga prosecution. Well, all we have is hope, di ba? Yun lang yung meron tayo. All we can do is hope that they will do their job as the judges for this case, di ba? Pero, expect for the worst. Diba? Na FPRRD, no, this case might proceed. I think, no, mataas yung chance na kung totoo man yung sinasabi nila, no, that the ICC is paid already, magpo-proceed yan. Diba? Pero if the ICC will do this in good faith, diba? Lalo yung mga judges, they are not paid to do it. Diba? Malamang sa malamang, there is a big chance na FPRRD makaalis, no? There is a big chance that FPRRD will go out of the prison, no, at makauwi ng Pilipinas. Anyway, if it proceeds, no? Tandaan nyo, hindi pa naman doon nag-e-end lahat yan. Okay? Papasok tayo ng trial proper and no, the prosecutor will show everything. No? Hopefully, they will show everything to us. Tapos, si Kaufman naman will defend FPRRD using the evidences that he has as well or he have. 'Di ba? Feel ko teach diyan uuwi si Digong sa Pinas if ever, sabi. Well, kung makalaya siya, I think so. I think hypothetically, kung makalaya siya, I think he will not go back to the Philippines kasi ang gagawin sa kanya, no? Pagdating sa Pilipinas, samot-saring kaso pa rin yung isasampa sa kanya sa Pilipinas. Okay? They will try to, alam nyo kasi, the charisma of FPRRD is still there. Diba? If bumalik siya ng Pilipinas, then campaigns for the Vice President, there's a big chance that Vice President Sara will win. And they don't want that. Diba? Ayaw nilang manalo yung Vice President. So, they will try their best to keep FPRRD busy, kumbaga. Lamang talaga prosek sa confirmation, sabi rito. Let's just hope for the best and expect for the worst. Diba? If mag-proceed ang trial, wag sana nilang i-redact yung defense, sabi rito. Baka maninoy siya. Wag naman sanang maninoy. Mahirap din na, 'di ba? Bigla na lang maninoy. Kulit naka-live stream ako pero sa Thailand. Wanikap. Pero kahit kasuhan si Duterte, mahina na si Duterte, teach, wala na. In a way, mga abala lang. Diba? Malit ang chance si VP Sara, teach, kasi yung C4GG mayor, hawak yata ni BBM. I don't think so. I don't think so. So, ano lang sila? Because they are required to go there by law. Okay? Kasi nga, they are under the executive department. Okay? So they are required to go there. But that does not equate na hawak sila ni PBBM. Kasi ano sila under the executive Di hawak ni BBM yung C4GG, malabo. Nakikiano lang yung mga yan, what do you call this? Nakikisama lang ngayon. But you will see, no? You will see it comes election. Siyempre ngayon, do not show your cards pa. 'Di ba? If you show your cards, pag-iinitan ka. Kawawa yung constituents mo. Pwede mo namang ilabas yung cards mo during the time na teka, eto na, 'di ba? Ride in lang. Teach kung totoo 'yan, no? Malabong tanggapin ni Mayor 'yan. Alam nyo ba, at sinasabi ko nga, eto kwento ko sa inyo before. Nung nag-iingay si Mayor Magalong during the AKAP program, no? Inalok din siya ni Tambi. Okay, eto reliable yung source ko, sabi nga ni Mayor. Inalok din siya ni Tambi. Na kung eto si Benji, baka nagtatampo kaya nag-iingay. Bigyan din natin si Benji. He never accepted it. Nag-ingay pa rin siya doon. Hanggang mapadpad na sa ibang issue na naman. The next is yung sa ICI. Nung sa ICI, no? Abonado pa siya doon sa ICI. Hindi naman gumastos yung gobyerno natin for Mayor Magalong. Magkano daw, Teach? Secret. Magkano yung bigayan that time? Nasa 20 plus, 'di ba? Yung 20 plus million. Sinasabi nila, ha? I'm not quite sure how much is it during that time. Pero for sure, no? One thing is for sure, etong sila Tambi, they tried pero hindi tinanggap. Hello there, 8 viewers that I have in TikTok. Hello. Anong size ng maleta yan? Hindi ko nga alam eh. And kung pakikinggan nyo rin si Atty. Libayan, many have tried. Kung tutuusin, mayaman na sila kung tinanggap nila eh. Seriously. Kung tinanggap lang, mayaman na sila. They will not worry, no? Sa live, no? Well off ka na agad. Hindi mo na kailangan mag-abogado, gano'n. Hindi mo na kailangan mag-mayor kasi paldo ka na eh. Pwede ka nang mag-retire. Sabi sa ganang mamamayan, 30 minutes delay para makontrol nila ang statement sa defense. Sabi rito. Kala nila lahat mukhang pera. Legit yun. Kaya tignan nyo, di ba? Nung lumabas itong mga 18 na Marines, ano yung statement nila? That Tambi, no, and Zaldi, namimigay sila ng pera. Kumbaga, nagpapamudmud sila ng pera. Baka naging defender ni Tambi si Atty. Libayan, no, Teach? Baka pag nagkataon, no? Kaso they are different from that. Luto muna habang nag-aantay. Di lahat nababayaran. Exactly. Diba? Kaya nga, ewan ko yung mga parang maraming mga manonood ngayon na akala nila bayad lahat ng ng mga content creators din, no? Na yun nga, yung issue kay Norman Mangusin at kay Rapi Tulfo, they thought, no, we are getting paid by makagago para tirahin si Rapi Tulfo at si Norman Mangusin. No. Rapi Tulfo is our first love. Tumunod lang si Norman. Pera talaga ang ginagapang ni BBM. Kawawa yung tayo ng mga nag-aambag niyang pera na yan. Alam mo, wala naman sana talaga tayo dito ngayon. We wouldn't have this problem, no? Kung si BBM, no, hindi siya nagpakakamay na bakal na lang siya when it comes to those people who are trying to seize the power, no? For those people who wanted to control the system. Kapag nagpakakamay na bakal ka, kahit anong gawin yan, kahit pinsan mo yan, walang mangyayari. 'Di ba? Kaso wala eh. Hinayaan lang niya. Even etong si Toby Tiangco admitted. 'Di ba? Hinayaan lang. If I were in his shoe that time, Talagang i-expose ko yun. I-expose ko yung pinsan ko because I will be the one, no, will be suffering dun sa ginagawa mo. Kamay na, kamay na nasa tuter. Teach, I wish na isama ni Kaufman sa pag-debunk yung video footage ng CCTV, sabi rito. Wala sana tayo dito ngayon kung nasobrahan, no? Expose teach if in good faith. Hindi papayag si Torny Libayan maging kakampi niya si Ante Claire pag nagkataon. Nasa lahi na nga siguro nila yung pagnanakaw. Well, it started from the father, di ba? From the father to the son. Actually, eto yaman rin lang na nandito na tayo, no, sa usapan na to. Etong si Lenny and Marcos VP debate. Try to look at this.
Claim they were human
Ito.
rights violations victims of martial rule in the Philippines from 1972 to 1986, or as next of kin of victims who have suffered, died, or disappeared during the administration of the late President Ferdinand Marcos. This next question goes to, and can I appeal to the audience, please?
Okay. Ito tignan nyo Tignan yung sagot niya rito.
Can we please allow our candidates? I'm sure you expected that question was coming
Yes,
for
I
you.
did. I certainly
As the son
did.
of the late President.
Nung panahon na hindi pa siya nangingiwi-ngiwi. Nung panahon na straight pa yung bibig niya. Oo. Hindi pa nasobrahan ng white powdery substance, ha? Ito.
President, do you acknowledge that during your
What's that?
that question was coming
Yes,
for
I
you?
did. I
As
certainly
the son
did.
of the late President, do you acknowledge? I'm sure you expected that question was coming
Yes,
for
I
you.
did. I
As the
certainly
son
did.
of the late President, do you
Ay, nangiwi na pala siya nun, sorry. Stand to be corrected, gagi.
acknowledge that during your father's term, human rights abuses were committed, and are you willing to apologize for them? Your response, please.
I certainly acknowledge every human rights abuse in every administration. I think it is necessary that we do so, or else we are to repeat the mistakes and abuses of the past. What I can say also to you is that in my 27 years of service, there has never been any suspicion, any accusation, or even any allegation made against me that there were human rights abuses or non-recognition of people's civil rights in my time in government. I will apologize for I have said this before,
Ito. Tignan niya to.
and I will say it again. I will apologize for any wrongdoing that I may have done, any mistake that will have caused anyone any pain or hardship. But I can only apologize for myself.
And not for your
Di ba? Di ba? Kasi nga, no, sa pananaw niya, no, yung father niya did not do anything wrong. Subtle na yung ngiwi. Yeah, yung nung panahon na yan, no, sa tingin niya walang ginawang masama yung niya, tatay niya. Tama siya dyan, sabi rito. Ngayong araw ba lalabas yung desisyon yun ang hindi ko alam, no? Wala na, yung nga pala. Wait lang. Baka masobrahan tayo ng kwentuhan, start na pala. May 15 minutes pa naman. 15 minutes. Mild ngiwi pa lang. At saka titignan niyo yung sa face niya, no? Wala pa yung uka dito. Sa left. Sa kabila. May uka siya kasi. Di ba? Kakangiwi. Kung saan kasi yung napi-flex lagi, doon umuuka. Lagi siyang ngumingiwi dito sa side na to. Kaya nagkakaroon ng wrinkle. Kung sa mata niya noon, okay na yon, paano pa sa mga ginawa nila ngayon?
Father.
I cannot apologize for anyone else, only myself and for what I have done.
Congresswoman Leni Robredo, in an interview, you said that the lack of
Diba? Tinurog siya ni Lenny dito eh. Kaya siya nag-relapse daw, sabi ni Amy. Diba? Well, anyway, no? Teach para sa yung arguments. Oh yes. May palag yung arguments ng defense, no? Marami silang na-debunk doon sa mga arguments ng kabila, yung prosecution. Sabi ng iba ang effect ng stroke eh. Kasi ang father ko na stroke din. Actually, lahi namin, no? Lahi namin is prone sa sa ganyan, sa stroke. Kaya nga, syempre, nung namaya pa si Reg, putya, kinabahan ako eh. Workout talaga tayo eh. Oo, kasi kung titignan niyo yung mga first video ko, payat pa ako doon. Kasi nag-workout ako that time. Tas siguro mga ilang taon, 3 taon ako natigil. Ngayon lang uli ako nag-workout. So far naman, okay naman. Naka naman na ako. Ilan ba? 5 kilos yung nabawas ko for 1 month. 1 month mahigit. Si Jeremy, yung sa prosecution, yung laging tumatawag kay Kaufman ng my friend. As my friend, ganun. Magkaiba yung effect ng stroke at coke, teacher Mark. Yes. No? Kasi pag stroke yan, pag bumagsak yung kabilang katawan mo, no? Bagsak talaga yan. Kung mild stroke naman guys, no? Ito lang. 'Di ba? Hindi mo makokontrol yung sa side ng mukha mo. Pero iba yung sa kanya, nakokontrol naman niya eh. And alam ko yung mga ganyang mga gawi, no? Kasi nga nung before panahon ni FPRRD guys, talamak din dun sa amin, sa barangay namin. Okay? So, kilala namin yung mga gumagamit kasi yung mga facial expressions nila makikita ninyo na nag-twitch ba? May auto-twitching yung mukha nila. May mga gumaganon-ganon pa. Kasi yung parang nanginginig yung gilagid. Ako yung nahihirapan minsan eh kasi syempre pag may, di ba, pag may lamay ganon. Siyempre nakikiusyoso ka sa sugal, no? Tapos sila nanonood din, tas galaw-galaw. Problema nun. Di ba? Well, anyway, no? Let's end it there, guys. Baka may ang laki naman ng singaw na yan. Nangangatal, teach, oo. Nangangatal. Uy, nag-share ng live. Hindi din Bell's palsy. Yung Bell's palsy, ganoon sa vocalista ng Wolfgang. Okay, si Basti Artadi. Ganoon yung Bell's palsy. Parang naglo-lockdown yung kabilang muka. Diba? And Hindi ko alam kung there is a cure for it, but some people kasi parang wala na eh, 'di ba? Sabi rito, hindi rin Bell's palsy kasi paralyzed din, hindi magalaw. Walang movements. May Bell's palsy ako, iba sa BBM. Pag ganun. Sorry. Paside eh. Diba? Mga nanonood. Kopon Cup. Ayan. Sa mga thank you for the heart. Kopon Cup. Pero teach, pansin mo, hindi ba nakatayo ng diretso si parang Cuba? Well, ever since noong nagkasakit siya, no? Paki-check na. Oo nga pala, no? Ever since nung nagkasakit siya, that happened already sa kanya. Wait, lipat pala natin. Kunin natin yung para mag-portal na lang kayo. Sige, end muna natin dito. Portal muna kayo sa kabila. I'll see you there, no? So, yan lamang guys. See you sa next live stream. Teacher Mark out. Bye-bye guys.